Morning, friends. I hope you are all safe in your homes. Today, we are facing so many problems, challenges in this pandemic situation around the world, particularly in education sector also. So, take care of your health and our family members is the essential duty for us. Please concentrate your studies. So, I would like to express my wholehearted thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr.JOSEPH. He thinking about the students' welfare to arrange the online classes. So please utilize these online classes before we entering into the campus. Don't waste your time. Please concentrate the class. Okay, in the previous class, I have discussed about the meaning and the definitions of foreign policy. Today, I would like to discuss about the objectives of foreign policy. Objectives of foreign policy. Okay, now I will share a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, welcome to the Adikavi Nannaya University, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Malladi Satyalingana Naikar campus, Kakinada. It is the extension center of Adikavi Nannaya University, Rajamahendravaram. Okay, myself, Dr. Joseph Stephen Pomara, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Adikavi Nannaya University, MSN campus, Kakinada. Okay, today I would like to explain about the objectives of foreign policy. National interest can be explained as aims passed on to the policy makers of the community. Every state has a separate national interest. The national interest explained as it aims to the policy makers by their community, by their country. So, the security against aggression. Security against aggression. Sometimes some of the countries are aggressive nature. Sometimes it is peaceful nature. But many countries to establish peace among the nations, to establish good relations with the other nations. Apart from, every state has to secure their land, to protect their country. That is why they they are interesting to protect. They are establishing to the country for their security. So security against aggression. Aggression means in Telugu దూకుడుగా వ్యవహరించడం. Okay, so security is the essential part of the state, and another objective objective is development of higher standards of living. So every state has to develop a good standards of living for their people, for their country. To develop their country in future, a great results for their development. So the aspect of development is the one of the part of higher standards of living. And the maintenance of conditions of national and international stability. So stability is one of the good skill about the country. So a particular stable government in the national level, it is to maintaining the condition of stability with other countries. So the condition of stability is also a key played a key role in national and international, external and internal affairs. So maintenance of stability is the a good objective of foreign policy. So foreign policy is inconceivable without national interest. Foreign policy is inconceivable without national interest. So a separate national interest for each and every country, it is inconceivable. And on the other side, objectives are the product of national interest. Objectives are the product of national interest. So that is why the objectives is played a key role in the foreign policy. According to Mahendra Kumar, objectives of foreign policy is interests spelled out and made precise in the light of the present day complexity of international relations. So the objectives of foreign policy is interests spelled out and made precise in the light of the present day complexity of international relations. So interest is the every state's feeling or every state's to proclaim their feeling to the another nations, to the other nations. So the present days, the complexity of international relations are most important for each and every country. There was some complexities between the nations. That's why interest is one of the goal of international relations. So objectives are more specific nature than interests. So the difference between objectives and interests. So objectives are more specific nature than interests. So before we telling about objectives are the product of national interests. So the objectives are very important for their country's policy. So objectives are more specific nature than interests. And now some of the common objectives of the foreign policy. Nearly, I would like to explain 12 objectives of the foreign policy. Okay, number one, maintaining countries' security and its territorial integrity, prosperity and progress of the country, establishment of India as a preeminent power in South Asia. Okay, maintaining nations' security and its territorial integrity. So every country should establish security for their country, for their territorial integrity. So every country should maintain security for the welfare of their country, for the welfare of their people. So it is the most important. And another one is prosperity and progress of the country. ఏ దేశం కూడా తన దేశ ప్రజలు తన దేశం అభివృద్ధి చెందకూడదని ఆశించరు. That's why prosperity, development is the most important in the country's desire. So every country should develop their culture. Every country has to develop their civilization, language, industrial promotion, service sector promotion, and making the products of their country. These are all helpful to the development or progress or prosperity to the country. So it is the common objective of foreign policy. And establishment of India as a preeminent power in South Asia. There are 8 countries came under the South Asian countries: Afghanistan, Burma or Myanmar, Bhutan, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal. These are all came under the South Asian countries. India is the biggest country in the South Asia. Population is also one of the key role played in these South Asian countries. So India is the highest population in South Asian countries, and also so many natural resources are available in India. That is why India is a developing country more than the other South Asian countries. That is why the India's objective is preeminent power in South Asia. In this connection, India played a big role in South Asian countries. In the establishment of SAARC also, India played a key role to establish a regional cooperation among the South Asian countries. Okay. And promotion of strength and solidarity of all Afro-Asian countries so that they may count in world affairs. Basically, basically, the Africa and Asian countries are came under the ruling of Britishers. So most of the countries are colonies of the British Empire. After Second World War, the Afro-Asian countries got independence from the Britishers. That is why the Afro-Asian countries' political development, economic development, social development, and etc. Some so to promote their strength and solidarity. Actually, the Afro-Asian countries, basically poorer countries, backward countries, but they got independence after Second World War. To establish promotion of strength and solidarity, so they may count in world affairs. They, they played active role in world affairs. It is one of the objective of Afro-Asian countries. And fighting against all types of colonialism, imperialism, and racialism. So, colonialism or colonies. Most of the Africa and Asian countries came under the ruling of Britishers before Second World War. So, these are all wanted to independence from Britishers. That is why they fight against to the Britishers because they want to got independence. They got free from the colonialism. So they want to against the fighting with colonialism. India is the one of the country to promote independence and to recognize most of the countries' independence. So India is played a key role free from Britishers ruling and imperialism. The Western European countries are established imperialism. It is the in the Western Europe and America, imperialism is one of the key factors. Industrialized countries, developed countries. So, Pettubadi Swami Vidhanam, capitalistic society is establishing in the Western European countries. So most of the Afro-Asian countries are under the Britishers or other Western European countries. The influencing imperialism in the Afro-Asian countries. That is why it is also one of the key factor to fighting against the imperialism and racialism. African countries are basically black people. So some countries, the difference from the racialism, black people and white people. So the Afro-Asian countries interest to against the fighting with racialism and avoidance of involvement in power blocks or military alliance. So in Western European countries like England, Italy, France, Germany, Sweden. So these countries are Western European countries, and they are the developed countries. And America is also another power bloc in the world. So the First World War and Second World Wars are fighting with the developed countries: Germany, France, England, Austria, Germany, and apart from Russia, America, so many countries. So the Afro-Asian countries should maintain the avoidance of involvement in power blocks or military alliance because they are poorer countries, they are developing countries, they are third world countries. They got independence after the Second World War. That is why their involvement is very low, or their involvement is neutrality from the power blocks or biggest countries or military alliance countries. The power blocks or military alliances are making their security, making their country's security armaments. So the Afro-Asian countries avoidance of involvement in power blocks and our military alliance. And common objectives of foreign policy is promoting economic interests of foreign aid from all quarters of economic development. So every country should develop their country with the support of biggest countries, with the support of developed countries. So they got aids, they got funds from all quarters of economic development from their country. So to promote economic interest is one of the objective of foreign policy. And playing an active role in the UNO, United Nations Organization. So playing an active role, it is the essential part of the UNO because the Afro-Asian countries, basically developing nations, third world nations, they are backward nations in the world. That is why they maintaining a good relations with other nations or big nations, and also the world government like the United Nations Organization is one of the great organization in the world. That is why the third world countries, the developing countries, the Afro-Asian countries playing an active role in the UNO. It is one of the objective of foreign policy. supporting the cause of disarmament, particularly prohibiting manufacture, stockpiling, and use of nuclear weapons. So, the biggest countries made, making armaments for their security, but the developing nations, the third world nations, are supporting the cause of disarmament. Armament means ఆయుధీకరణ. Disarmament means in Telugu నిరాయుధీకరణ. ఆయుధాలని విచ్ఛిన్నం చేయడం. To decreasing the armaments. So particularly prohibiting manufacture. Particularly prohibiting manufacture of armaments. So it will stop. So and stockpiling. ఆయుధాలను తయారు చేసుకుని వాటిని దాచిపెట్టి ఉంచుకోవడం. దీన్ని కూడా we are against the policy is stockpiling and the use of nuclear weapons. So the common objective is the supporting the cause of disarmament, particularly prohibiting manufacture, stockpiling, and use of nuclear weapons. And another one is supporting the cause of developing nations. So the above common objectives are supporting the cause of developing nations because they did not manufacture armaments. They did not making nuclear weapons. That is why they supporting disarmament, stockpiling, and nuclear weapons. So the third world countries are the developing countries supporting this type of programs and protecting national prestige and developing national power. Protecting national prestige to establish their prestige, their country's prestige, and also the developing national power in a stable manner. So stability is the most important in the national power, in particularly in political aspects. In India, politically developed, whereas in Afghanistan, Burma, Nepal, Pakistan, these are all instability atmosphere in their political arena. So every country, every state has to protecting national prestige and developing national power and maintaining world order. So good relations with other nations, good conduct to establish, to maintaining peace with other nations. So the world order is the common objectives of foreign policy. And thus the study of foreign policy includes policy makers, interests and objectives, principles of foreign policy, and means of foreign policy. So policy makers, Every country has a separate government. They are elected directly or indirectly. Most of the countries, government elected by the people. So every state, every country has a separate government. So that government is the policy maker of their country. So different types of political parties are there. Some countries multitude parties. Some countries two party system. Some countries kings rule. So different types. But every country has a government. Every country has policymakers. So the policymakers played a key role in the making of foreign policy. And another one, interests and objectives. So interests is the inconceivable without national interest, and objectives are the product of national interest, and also the objectives are more specific nature than interests. Before I telling clearly, so every country has separate national interest and objectives. And third one is principles of foreign policy. So some rules and regulations, maintaining some rules and regulations for their foreign policy. So principles is the one of the key role played in their foreign policy. And means of foreign policy. Means of foreign policy. సో ఒక అర్థవంతమైనటువంటి పాలసీని కలిగి ఉండడానికి ప్రయత్నించాలి. సో నో వన్ కెన్ disturb their means of foreign policy. That is why to achieving objectives in foreign relations as dictated by the ideology of national interests. So to achieving objectives in foreign relations dictated by the ideology of national interests. So the national interest is the ideology of the nation. National interest is the ideology of the nation. So to achieving the objectives of foreign policy, foreign relations as dictated by the national interest. And I will give you a example, that is the United States of America's foreign policy. Actually, they implemented different types of policies with other nations. Like one policy towards the United Soviet Socialist Republic, like Russia. Erstwhile it is called as USSR. United Soviet Socialist Republic. So in 60s, 70s and 80s, the Cold War between the USA and the USSR. The world are divided into these two power blocks. Some countries supporting USSR, some countries supporting USA. So the big power blocks established in 1960s, 70s and 80s. That is USA and USSR. That is why the USA has to develop a separate foreign policy to the USSR. And another policy towards the West Europe. West Europe means like Germany, Sweden, England, France, Italy. These are all Western European countries. They are industrialized countries. They are capitalistic society countries. They are developed countries. That's why the USA's policy is different from USSR to the Western Europe. And another one, a third one towards Latin America. A third one towards Latin America. So these countries, the Latin American countries, speak in Spanish and Portuguese. So these two languages are classified as Roman languages. So these two languages derived from Latin. So hence the name Latin America is called some countries. So Latin America means it is spreading all over the North North America and South America. So the Latin American countries are basically in North USA is Mexico, and the North American countries Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama. These are all North American countries. Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama. These are all belongs to North American countries. Mexico is also North American country. Sorry. So the Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama are Central American countries. Central American countries. Mexico is the North American country. And the South American countries is Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, French Guiana, Peru, Suriname, Uruguay, Paraguay, Venezuela. These are all belongs to South American countries. So the South, North, and Central American countries are called as Latin American countries. The Spanish and Portuguese is the languages are classified from the Roman Empire. And these group of countries, dependence is in the Western Hemisphere, where the Romans languages, so predominantly it is spoken by Latin. So the USA's separate policy towards Latin America, and a fourth one towards Africa. So Africa is the poorest country, undeveloped country, backward country. Black people are suffering with hunger. So that is why a separate policy for African nations from the USA's policy. So according to Felix Gross, the study of foreign policy should be treated as a science or discipline. According to Felix Gross, recommends that the study of foreign policy should be treated as a science. It is a discipline. Okay, and the tasks of the makers of foreign policy are four. The tasks of the makers of foreign policy are four. Number one, formulation of interests and objectives, the procurement of power from the community, the definition of objectives and the allocation of the means of foreign policy. So, the tasks of the makers of foreign policy are four types. So, formulation of interests and objectives. Every state has to formulate their national interests, their national objectives. So, where there is no interest, where there is no objectives formulation, that's country behave very badly in the international relations. That is why every country should formulate of interests and objectives of their foreign policy. And the second one is the procurement of power from the community. Procurement of power from the community. Basically, they got basically the policymakers are elected by the people. That is why they got power. So every political party or ruling party to make some policies and some interests and objectives of their country. So the procurement of power from the community. And the third one is the definition of objectives. Not only making objective, it is to define very clearly their national interest, to define their feelings with other nations, with other nations' relations, like international relations. So every country should define their objectives. The allocation of the means of foreign policy. The allocation of the means of foreign policy. So every state has to allocate some time, some administration, some funds for the development, for the sake of foreign policy, for the relations with other nations. So it is one of the tasks of foreign policy. So national independence can never be an objective of foreign policy. So the makers of foreign policy are an important part in the process of foreign policy. So the makers of foreign policy are an important part in the process of foreign policy. So it is the important part. And also because they not only formulate policies, they not only formulate policies, but also mold the nature of national interests and objectives. So the nature of national interests and objectives. And that is why some writers' views about the foreign policy is to consist in the set of decisions made by the policymakers. In the set of decisions made by government. So foreign policy is most essential for the country. So the national independence can never be an objective of foreign policy. So it must. The objective is more important. of their national independence. Not only national independence, they prefer to make it objective of foreign policy. Because only an independent nation can have a foreign policy. If they are ruling some countries, or if any country depend by the other country or ruling by the other country, they cannot have a foreign policy. They did not going to relation with the other nations. So the only independent nation can have a foreign policy. Where there is no independence, there is no foreign policy for a state. Okay, and then next, no nation aims at only one foreign policy goal. No nation aims at only one foreign policy goal. సో ఎట్టి పరిస్థితుల్లోనూ ఒక్క గోల్ తోటే, ఒక్క ఎయిమ్ తోటే, ఒక్క ఇంట్రెస్ట్ తోటే, ఒక్క ఆబ్జెక్టివ్ తోటే ఫారెన్ పాలసీని డిజైన్ చేసుకుంటాను అంటే కుదరదు. సో ఎవ్రీ నేషన్ షుడ్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ a different or multitude goals at one and the same time. Multitude of goals. They establish multitude of goals. They are making some different types of goals for their country's welfare, development. So single policy is not preferable for a nation. They are preferably multitude of goals. Okay, and according to Arnold Wolfers, distinguished the foreign policy is possession goals and milieu goals. Possession goals and milieu goals. The meaning of possession goals is in Telugu స్వాధీనం చేసుకోవడం అని అర్థం. స్వాధీనం చేసుకోవడం. A foreign policy seeks to achieve in order to preserve its possessions like a stretch of territory or membership of some world organization. A foreign policy seeks to achieve in order to preserve its possessions like a stretch of territory or membership of some world organization. So possession is to achieve or a stretch of territory and joining the membership some world organization. And another important one is milieu goals. Peace is an example of a milieu goal of national policy. So every state should establish peace among the nations with border countries, to establishing peace with border countries, with other countries, a good relations with other countries. That is why peace is the key role played in the international relations. So మన పరిసర పరిస్థితిని చక్కదిద్దుకోవడం అని అర్థం. మిలియా గోల్స్ మీన్స్ మన చుట్టుప్రక్కల ఉన్న పరిస్థితిని చక్కదిద్దుకోవడం. To maintaining good relations with the boundary nations, with other nations. But in actual practice, however, media goals may only be the means for the pursuit of possession goals. So, actually, in practice, the media goals may only be the means for the pursuit of possession goals. And some writers prefer to express international goals to media goals. International goals to media goals. ఎప్పుడైతే అంతర్జాతీయ లక్ష్యాలను మనం కలిగి ఉంటామో అప్పుడే ఈ మీడియా గోల్స్ కూడా మనం కలిగి ఉండగలం. సో టు టు ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ పీస్, టు ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ గుడ్ రిలేషన్స్ విత్ ఈచ్ అదర్, విత్ అదర్ నేషన్స్. సో ద ఇంటర్నేషనల్ గోల్స్ టు మీడియా గోల్స్ and national independence and national security are direct national goals. Actually, every country will prefer a free, independent state, and also to protect their country, to protect their people, protect their boundaries. So these are all called to establishing security, their people, their country, their boundaries. These are all direct national goals. Without this type of national goals, no country has to maintaining a stable government in their country and also a stable relations with other nations. So national independence and national security are direct national goals. Okay, so these are all the objectives of foreign policy. The importance of foreign policy. Okay, friends, I hope you are all understand about the concept of objectives of foreign policy. If you have any doubts, please contact me. I will clarify your doubts. Next class, I will give you a detailed topic of ingredients, determinants, and determinants of foreign policy. And then philosophical and historical background of India's foreign policy. So the next classes is two topics I will explain. So please once again to hear this lesson, please concentrate from online class. Okay. Okay, friends. Meet you soon. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.